Shalom to everyone. A warm welcome into the ICEJ's headquarters here in Jerusalem for our weekly webinar. We just thank you for joining us, people coming from all over the world to take up another important topic. We're on current affairs this week, and we're talking about the rocket war, 5-day rocket war last week with Palestinian Islamic Jihad firing 1,500 rockets at Israel, the IDF taking out some of their top commanders. And the question is, did Israel win this round, this latest rocket war? Is that a short-term win, a long-term win? And here, helping us to sort this out is our friend, General Amir Aviv. He's in the IDF Brigadier General in the reserves, and also the founder and chairman of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. And we are so happy to have you with us, General Aviv. I know you're in Washington right now, getting up early in the morning. You've got important appointments on Capitol Hill today, but thanks for giving us some of your time to help us sort this out.
A pleasure. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yes. Now, we had an escalation over Passover a few weeks ago, and then you had rockets fired from Gaza. The next day, 30-some rockets fired from South Lebanon. The day after, 6 rockets from Syria, and you know, from 3 directions, sort of signaling that Iran's proxy militias in the area are ready for a multi-front war, that Israel sort of dreads having to face rockets coming from all directions, but how would they handle it? And coming out of that escalation, Iran, which is behind these groups, was saying, we have a united front of resistance against the Zionist enemy and such. And so when this rocket war started last, Tuesday night, Wednesday, we were wondering whether we would get rockets not only from Gaza, not only from Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas, but also from Hezbollah in the north, maybe from Syria, maybe even from Iraq. But that didn't happen. It was just Israel and this smaller, really committed Islamist terror militia. But tell us what happened here. What's your assessment? Did Israel really, can they claim victory here? How big of a victory? I know we've talked about it a little earlier this week. Please, General V.
Okay, so victory is an interesting concept to discuss, but maybe I'd like to start with what's happening now as we speak. There is a Day of Jerusalem. The Jews are marching with their flags, proud, in the old city. And when the Jews really are showing proudness and conviction, and all of them, tens of thousands with flags marching in Jerusalem, our enemies feel we are strong and are deterred. So it's exactly the opposite of what some people might say, that by being Jews in the land of Israel, we're provoking the Arabs. And I think that today there is a tendency of part of the society to say, you know, let's not provoke them, let's not bring our flags, let's not march, let's not talk about Jerusalem Day, and it's exactly the opposite. When we show weakness, don't show conviction, when we forget who we are, then our enemies feel emboldened and they feel they can win, because it's all about spirit. And now we have tens of thousands of Jews marching in the Day of Jerusalem, and they're not shooting. They're deterred. We have to understand the overall picture. A week ago, we had a big convention, and Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke in our convention, and he said something that is very accurate. He said 95% of everything we are experiencing, talking about terror, is Iran. Iran is building a force around us and inside us. Around us, it's through its militias in Lebanon with Hezbollah, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, and also in Gaza. Both Islamic Jihad and Hamas are Iranian proxies, funded by Iran. All the know-how, the munitions, everything is Iranian. Iran is also investing a lot of money in Judea and Samaria, in the different Palestinian fractions, and even in East Jerusalem, and incites and tries to carry out as many terror attacks. And this is why we see a coordination across borders. We see shooting from Lebanon, from Syria, from Gaza. They are challenging us in many, many fronts. In the last few months, we have seen a dramatic decline in Israel's deterrence. This is due to two main things that happened that are connected. One is all this political turmoil around the judicial reform, the huge demonstrations all over Israel, which gave our enemies the feeling that Israeli society is breaking down. Hezbollah leader has been talking for a long time about the fact that the Israeli society is like a spider's web. It looks strong from afar, but when you touch it, it's weak. And not only we had all these demonstrations, also as part of this process, there were reservists writing letters and saying, if the judicial reform goes on, we will not serve. And then there was a crisis inside the army, and the feeling that the army is breaking down, and the army is not functioning, and the Air Force is not in full readiness. I remember 2 weeks ago interviewing in an Arab channel, and the interviews I do there is usually me in the studio, and then in the Zoom you have an Iranian, and you have somebody from Saudi Arabia, and so on. I never saw such a reality where they were all mocking Israel, saying, that's it, you guys are done. Iran is going to win, Iran is strong, and so on. And it was clear that we have a huge, huge problem with our deterrence. And what the government and the army did, I think it was a very wise choice, and I'll explain it. They chose from all the different organizations that are challenging us, Islamic Jihad, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranians themselves, they chose the weakest organization, the Islamic Jihad, and also the one that is the most extreme and does a lot of trouble. And Israel initiated an attack on this organization by surprise. It started by basically decapitating all the leadership of this organization in Gaza, the 3 main leaders. And then as the operation continued for a few days, we also decapitated all the guys that replaced this leadership. So in 4 days, 6 of the leaders were decapitated. And as a result, there is no leadership at the moment in Gaza to this organization. And we also destroyed most of their infrastructure. And this is an operation where we got maximum deterrence with minimum price. When Hezbollah and Hamas and the Iranians saw that the Israeli society is united around the operation, that the army is in full readiness, that the Air Force is in full capability, when they saw that we can decapitate the whole leadership of an organization in a few days, with amazing intelligence and operational capabilities, the message is what we did to the Islamic Jihad, we can do to the Hamas and to the Iranians and to Hezbollah. We can decapitate any organization leadership whenever we want. And we are able to do it by surprise. And also we're not afraid to fight. Rockets need to be shot, we'll manage and we'll deal with that. And we managed to really in a few days change everything in a moment, from zero deterrence almost to very high deterrence. And even now, when we are marching in Jerusalem and Hamas said they might shoot, and in Lebanon they said they might shoot, we see that it's not happening so fast. It might happen, but it's not happening at the moment. It means they are deterred. And I can tell you that today, even some of the Israeli MKs from the Likud and from Otzma Yehudit, they went up Temple Mount. And even this didn't get them to shoot. So obviously, there is deterrence. Now, the question is, what is winning? What does Israel perceive as a win? And Israel's strategy for, I would say maybe from Ben-Gurion times, but it's also in the last few decades, Israel is using a doctrine that is very, very similar to Truman's doctrine, known as the containment doctrine. When Truman was building its doctrine against the USSR at the time after Second World War, he decided to use a doctrine that says we're not going to challenge directly the USSR as a growing power. We're going to contain them. And this containment is what brought the war in Vietnam and later on in Korea. But the interesting part of the containment was actually done by Reagan. Reagan knew that the US economy is by far stronger and bigger than the USSR. Just if we compare today's US economy to Russia, it's 20 times bigger, and much more diversified. So what Reagan did, he did a military race with the USSR, and this military race brought the collapse of the USSR without even needing to shoot one bullet. The USSR simply couldn't cope with this race, and it collapsed. Israel, in the last decades, is doing something similar. And if you think about what happened in Israel in the last, let's say, 15 years, let's take Netanyahu's, even more, 20 years, since Netanyahu emerged as prime minister in 1999, 96, it's very similar. Israel is trying to avoid big wars. Israel is trying to enlarge the gap between operations in order to enable Israel to prosper, to thrive, technology, tourism, economy, and when the economy is growing, there is more money. And when there is more money, there is also more money to invest in the military. And Israel, in the last 20 years, has made a huge leap talking about how strong the economy is. Cannot even start to compare what was 20 years ago to now. How advanced we became technologically, how strong we became in the global arena with the relationship with the countries, relationships which brought the Abraham Accords. Our enemies recognized were strong, and it's really important to actually make peace with us. And of course, the military advanced a lot in many ways. And when we look at the Arab world in the same 20 years, we see the Arab Spring, we see collapse of countries, we see Syria, collapsing, Egypt that had a revolution, Libya that is not existent, Lebanon is hardly functioning as a country, Gaza, the situation is terrible, Iran with the internal uprisings that are having in the economy of Iran that is in a big problem. And when looking at all of that, the supporters of the containment doctrine are saying, you see, this is working. And this is win. So David, when you ask, is Israel winning? The way Israel perceives the win is that we constantly are getting stronger, bigger, stronger on the global level, economy is strong, the army is strong. And at the same time, we see a decline in the situation of our enemies. So this is a long-term win. It's not about one operation and what was achieved in this operation. It's a long race. You know, we're a 4,000 years nation. We think long-term. And this is what is perceived by Israel as a win. But what was true a few years ago, and this doctrine was 100% viewed as the right path, I think we are all feeling that something is changing, that this doctrine is now challenged. So maybe by a miracle and with God's will, this doctrine will actually succeed, meaning maybe we'll actually live to see a collapse of Iran, collapsing because of internal issues. Maybe we'll see Lebanon and Hezbollah going into civil war. Maybe we'll see the Palestinians the day after Abbas going into chaos and the Palestinian Authority collapsing. These things can happen. And then if this happens, every single person that is in favor of this containment doctrine will say, you see, it actually worked. But unfortunately, there is also a different scenario. And the different scenario is due to the fact that Iran has advanced, with all the challenges they are facing, has advanced a lot in the buildup of force of its proxies and also in its aspiration to military nuclear capabilities. In the last year, Iran is much more emboldened because the Russians have become dependent on Iran, and the Russians are now backing Iran in a way we haven't seen before. The CIA chief director said already in December that there is a Russian-Iranian bloc emerging in the Middle East. We see China backing up economically Russia and Iran. We see a decline in the American presence in the Middle East, and the Chinese and the Russians challenging, and the Iranians challenging America in the Middle East. This is strengthening Iran and emboldening them. And there is the buildup of force they're doing with Hezbollah, Hamas, and so on. And in this reality, we might see several scenarios that are not this desired scenario of a collapse, internal collapse of our enemies as we saw before in the Arab Spring, a Shia Arab Spring, let's say. The scenario we might see is Iran feeling strong enough to surprise us in a multi-front attack from Lebanon, from Hamas, from Syria, from Yemen. This might be very surprising because unlike armored brigades and divisions that you can see for months that they are getting ready to do something, when you shoot rockets and missiles and drones, this can happen very fast and by surprise. And this is a very complex scenario for Israel that might also be coupled by a some kind of internal uprisal, as we saw 2 years ago in Operation Guardians of the Wall. We in IDSF, we call this scenario a Yom Kippur scenario, something surprising, dramatic, that might surprise us. Another thing that might happen, and this is also a big change from what we have seen in the last decades, is that we Israelis, we realize that time has come to attack Iran because of the nuclear program, because we have to prevent them from becoming nuclear. And then this is a 6-day war scenario where we, by surprise, attack the Iranians, and as a result, the Iranians retaliate by shooting at us from Iran, from Lebanon, from Gaza, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, from all these places. And again, it's the same kind of war, but we initiate it, and we are the ones that take them by surprise, as we initiated now the attack on the Islamic Jihad. In both these scenarios, it's a war between Israel and Iran. There is also another scenario, and this is why I'm in Washington now, and I've been here in February, in March, and again, explaining again and again in Congress and Senate and with the administration that for the US, for the West overall, for Israel, the best thing that can happen is America stepping forward, showing leadership, building a coalition in the Middle East with Israel and the Sunni world, with the Saudis, and challenging Iran and posing a credible military threat. And what I said yesterday when I was in Capitol Hill is that America can learn from what we did this week with Islamic Jihad, because we had to build again deterrence. And we could have attacked Hamas, could have attacked Hezbollah, maybe the Iranians. But we took the Islamic Jihad, which was the weaker organization, and we attacked them. And we managed to build regional deterrence by really taking care of the smallest organization. Now, the same goes for the US. The US at the moment is challenging head-to-head the Chinese and bringing many forces to the Pacific, especially to the area of the Philippines, building huge bases, and putting a lot of effort in building a force in front of the Chinese, which might bring a global war. The US is also really involved deeply in the Russian-Ukrainian war, and a lot of the capabilities are going into Ukraine. And what I said is, instead of challenging the Russians directly, instead of challenging the Chinese directly, if you want to build your deterrence, go to the weak link, and the weak link is Iran, and challenge the Iranians. And this will deter the Chinese and the Russians because they feel the West has no willingness to fight. And if we challenge the Iranians, this will basically affect also the Chinese in the Pacific and also Russia in Europe. And of course, it will stop the expansion of China and Russia and Iran in the Middle East. And it will stabilize the region, because without stabilizing the Middle East, if we go into a regional war, this will affect the whole globe. This will affect the economies of every single country. Every American will feel that. So one scenario is building deterrence, bringing, by the way, new peace agreements with Saudi Arabia and maybe Pakistan and Indonesia, bringing prosperity and so on. And the other scenario is chaos, is a regional war. It doesn't matter if it's initiated by Iran or initiated by us. But both scenarios are not good globally. They are less good also for Israel and for the overall region. And we see in the last few weeks, Saudi Arabia renewed relations with Iran by China brokering this agreement, renewed relations with Syria. So the Middle East is changing very, very fast. The Sunnis are really bothered by the fact that America is not showing leadership and they are reaching out to the Chinese and to the Russians. And this is not good. It's not their first choice. They would rather build a coalition with America and Israel, but they are keeping their options open. And talking about keeping options open, I met with Ron Dermer a few weeks ago, former Israel's ambassador to the US, and of course, a minister and very close to Netanyahu. And one of the things he told me that a very high official in the administration came to him and said, hey, Ron, you Israelis, you are talking to the Russians, do the same, meaning we will, for example, give all of our major capabilities to Ukraine. But we're not doing it now because we want to keep good relations with the Russians. But if we have full American commitment, then we'll commit as well, and we'll assist much more dramatically with Ukraine. And this can shift the whole war in Europe. So there is a lot of advantages in really the US stepping forward. And one of the work we in IDSF are doing systematically, and this is something that it's like an extension of the government. We're helping the government push this because this is important. The government has certain amount of time to push things. And even if they talk to somebody, maybe this somebody needs to hear the same thing like 3-4 times before he really gets it. So we are helping here, meeting as many leading figures to really change the administration's policy and push the administration to show leadership in the Middle East. So to conclude, I think we're living in very complex times. There is a big change. I'm not sure that what we did till now, talking about our containment doctrine, is something that will continue to work the way it did in the last decades. And we need to be also ready for an option of a war. And we need to ask ourselves, if we are going to war, what do we want to achieve? Because this will be an opportunity to really make huge changes in the situation. If we are going to war, you can really actually destroy dramatically many things that are bothering us now in Lebanon or in Gaza. And we need to be ready for these scenarios. I can say that the army is moving very fast and enhancing the readiness. The government is really investing a lot in preparing the IDF and the other organizations for such a possibility. As I said, preventing a big war can be done, especially if America will be involved, and I hope we manage to convince them to do that. Thank you, David.
Yes, thank you, General Aviv, for that broad overview. I'd say global overview, historic as well, given some of the background to the Israeli army and Israeli political leaders, this theory of containing the threat against them. And all the best there in Washington. You've got many on the left who are progressives and turning on Israel, celebrating Nakba Day, even Bernie Sanders, a Jew, celebrating Nakba Day or observing it. And then on the right, some of the conservatives in the US are turning isolationist. There's not a whole lot of bipartisanship in
So I want to say something about Nakba. Okay?
Yeah.
I said it also yesterday in a wonderful event in Washington with Susan.
Our US branch, yeah.
Yeah. Every great story has a hero and a villain. And the greatest story of all in mankind is the story of the Jewish people. And we have to remember something really simple. We are the heroes of our own story. And when people push ideas like Nakba, they're basically trying to say, you are not the heroes of your story, you are the villains of your story. And we are not. We are the heroes of our story. And I think that each time we hear, especially I'm talking about the Jewish people, because you guys obviously understand well what I'm saying, really adopting these Palestinian narratives, you need to ask him a simple question. You need to decide, are you the hero of your story or the villain of your story? That's it. That's the two options. There is no other option. And it's clear to me, to my organization, and to most of the Jews, I think, that we are the heroes of our story.
Okay, very good. Okay, we only have a few minutes left with you because you got to rush to an appointment up in Congress. But let me just ask you a couple of questions about this recent conflict, because I know a lot of people are interested in knowing how did Israel have such good, actionable intelligence, and then these precise capabilities to take out the three main military commanders of Palestinian Islamic Jihad in that first opening shots of this conflict, and then three more be within the next 5 days.
So I think it's a combination of two things, very advanced capability to collect intelligence in many, many different kinds of intelligence. So you need really three things. You need to be able to collect the intelligence with different capabilities, whether it's human intelligence, visual intelligence, signal intelligence. We have many different kinds of intelligence. But I think the biggest advance is the ability, and this is AI capability, artificial intelligence capability, to fuse all these different sources in order to get one clear picture and fuse it really, really fast, because to targets today, the time they live are very short. So you need to be able to collect very fast, to fuse the information very fast, and also to be able to interconnect between the intelligence and the operational capabilities in a way that they get all the information live and immediately can act upon it. And then you need the operational capability to be really, really precise and timely. And I think this is what Israel has been really advancing steadily in the last 20 years. I can tell you that 20 years ago, for example, trying to get the ground forces to speak with the Air Force was impossible. They couldn't speak between each other. So at the beginning, we worked how can the Air Force Command speak with the ground forces command. And today we are talking about how a single soldier can speak with an airplane. So it's a completely different level of interactivity and fusion of information. And in this sense, there is no army in the world that can do what we can do.
Yeah, it just seems like you have this fusion of surveillance drones, and maybe satellites in space and planes flying over, and all the picture somehow is just integrated so that you know right where the targets are.
Exactly. The ability to bring everybody to see the same picture and understand it and know what to do and choose the right operational capability in a second. This is extremely, extremely advanced and complex, and it's getting better all the time. Our ability to use the artificial intelligence and to really process things really fast.
You've been in the war room and you've seen how quickly this operates.
Yes, it's amazing, and it gets more and more automatic.
because you've got a
possible.
concentrated area to defend, it's probably more advanced than anything in the world, even the Americans, I'd say.
And of course, there are many capabilities, you know, which we cannot discuss on Zoom. Because I can tell you guys what it is, but then I have to kill you all. So maybe I'll.
Okay, please spare us. Okay. The Iranians are saying, you know, they're trying to boast that they won because Israel, the Iron Dome was failing, but so they had to use the David Sling, the intermediate missile defense, and I mean, just grasping at straws to find something they could celebrate here. But for me, the big question is, why did Hamas not join in? I believe Israel was communicating, we're not targeting you, stay out of it. And was Iran disappointed with Hamas because they've been saying the whole resistance front is united, we're acting as one, we're going to open up a multi-front war, and it didn't happen this time.
I think this is an Iranian strategy. I think that Iran is trying to keep Hamas and Hezbollah intact, because they understand that as time goes by, the chances that we'll attack them or they will want to attack us is growing. And if we now destroy Hamas capabilities and then Hamas will need, I don't know, 2-3 years to build up again, this will hurt the overall readiness of Iran. They don't want to waste this capability just on, you know, an occasional operational opportunity. So I think this is Iranian strategy, and they're not disappointed. This is what they want. They want to keep Hamas and Hezbollah intact. This is why they encourage Hamas to do terror attacks in Judean and Samaria, to use maybe some of its militias in Lebanon or in Syria, and not challenge us directly from Gaza, because 2 years ago, we destroyed like 80% of Hamas capabilities. And then when they shot a few times, each time they shot a few rockets, we launched a major attack and destroyed capabilities that took them a long time to build, and tens of millions of dollars, whether it's tunnels, whether it's rockets. So they understand that they will pay a heavy price, that they don't want to do that. Our problem is that because unlike Judean and Samaria, we are not operating on an everyday basis in Gaza, as long as they're not shooting, they are building their forces all the time. And then, you know, when we will fight them, they will have a lot of capabilities.
Yeah. Okay, if we could take one more question. I think, you know, Israelis themselves were pretty impressed with how surgical Israel was in taking out decapitating, as you said, the military commanders of Palestinian Islamic Jihad. But some are saying, you know, it's every year, every other year, you're having to face these rocket wars. They just keep recurring, and it's just going to be, you know, a few months or so until the next one. And would it now be better to use some of the AI, some of the advanced capabilities Israel has, to now do some sort of ground operation in Gaza to really mow the grass there one more time and really reduce the threat to Israel?
Look, you know, when we will fight them, they will have a lot of capabilities.
Yeah. Okay, if we could take one more question. I think, you know, Israelis themselves were pretty impressed with how surgical Israel was in taking out decapitating, as you said, the military commanders of Palestinian Islamic Jihad. But some are saying, you know, it's every year, every other year, you're having to face these rocket wars. They just keep recurring, and it's just going to be, you know, a few months or so until the next one. And would it now be better to use some of the AI, some of the advanced capabilities Israel has, to now do some sort of ground operation in Gaza to really mow the grass there one more time and really reduce the threat to Israel?
Look, a ground operation in Gaza is full-scale war for months, if not years. Yeah. And I don't think it's something that brings an advantage to to Israel. I think that the way at the moment, the long term, Israel wants to overcome Gazan capabilities is, for example, the laser.
The laser, the
yeah.
Iron Beam.
Iron Beam. It will take us a year or 2 or 3, whatever it takes, to build the capability where they won't be able to launch even one rocket to Israel. Every single rocket will be exploded above Gazan skies. Israelis won't even get an alert. I mean, they will shoot and Israelis will continue with their life, everyday life, and everything will be dealt by laser. We took their ability to use tunnels.
Yes.
They are not able really to use UAVs. All they have left is the rockets, which even today are not really effective in hitting Israelis. We're almost able to really 90-something% prevent this, but the problem is not the rockets hitting or not hitting. The problem is that the whole society is under threat. You have, alarms that people have to run to, and it's frightening, and it frightens the children and everything. So if we can prevent that, if we can create a reality with these rockets, are not even able to cross our border, and in the speed of light, we destroy them above Gazan airspace, this will be a huge game changer and will render Hamas completely irrelevant. And in this sense, also Hezbollah. So I think that this will be probably a better solution for Israel than conquering all of Gaza again.
It could have its risk, but we thank you for your time. I know you need to go. If everyone can stay with us, we'll have some follow-up remarks, but we want to thank IDF Brigadier General in the Reserves, Amir Aviv, for joining us from his visit to Washington right now. Safe travels, success there on your mission, and we'll see you back in Israel, General Aviv. All the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, just want to let everyone know General Aviv spoke he spoke up on Capitol Hill yesterday, and then last night in an event by the ICEJ USA branch in Washington to mark Israel's 75th anniversary. There was a bit of a celebration of the Abraham Accords. There were some Arab ambassadors there. Jason Greenblatt, former official with the Trump administration who helped put together Abraham Accords. He was keynote speaker. There were several other government officials and others speaking. General Aviv, our president, Dr. Jürgen Buehler, and they had a nice celebration of the 75th last night. I think General Aviv will also be at the NRB, National Religious Broadcasters, next week, where Jürgen will be there. So really trying to hit the states right now with a good message of solid support for Israel and celebrating 75 years of independence in this nation where Israel can once again defend itself. And it was quite remarkable what happened over the past week. Just to give you a little more background, there had been an escalation in tensions around Passover about a month ago. And Israel got hit by 30-some rockets from Gaza one day, right before Passover, Arab Passover. Then 34 rockets from South Lebanon fired by Hamas. Hezbollah has allowed Hamas to go recruit Palestinians there in South Lebanon to fire rockets for them. And then even the next day, 6 rockets from an Islamist group or Iranian troops in Syria fired at Israel 3 different directions in 3 days in succession, sending a message to Israel: you're surrounded by all these Iranian proxy militias, and a lot of rhetoric coming out of Ramadan at the end of April, saying the resistance front against Israel is united, we're ready, Israel, you're surrounded. And then there was one of the leaders of the smallest of these terror militias here in Gaza, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They're funded directly by Iran for the sole purpose of bleeding Israel, attacking, carrying out terror attacks. They don't have any real political agenda within Palestinian society of, say, being a rival to Hamas or Fatah. But one of their leaders in the West Bank, who recruits terrorists, plans terror attacks, he was in jail and he wanted freed, and he went on a hunger fast, and it lasted 80 some days. The guy, it lasted all those days, and Israel was trying to feed him and trying to get him to eat again. He refused, and he died. So it was a little over a week ago that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad fired over 100 rockets from Gaza, all in like just a couple hours. So you had 100 rockets coming into Israel from this one terror militia that answers directly to Iran. And Israel needed to maintain or build deterrence against them, but they waited a couple days. And when their actionable intelligence, when they knew where these three, the main military commanders of Islamic Jihad were, they struck them all within a couple minutes of each other. They were miles apart in their homes, wherever they were, and boom, boom, boom. They also, lost members of their families. But if you're going to fire 100 rockets against Israel, you shouldn't be sleeping at home with your wife and children. You should be somewhere else. And so Israel did, targeted them. And it took a day or so for Islamic Jihad to sort of recover from that initial blow. And then they fired 1,500 rockets at Israel over the next 4 days. That was, by estimates, that was about a quarter of their arsenal of rockets. And about 20% of them, a lot of them are homemade, about 20% of those 1,500 landed inside Gaza. In fact, some of the casualties in Gaza were from Islamic Jihad rockets that were flawed, that veered off course, were duds, were malfunctioned, whatever. Within Israel, there was a lady that was killed. A rocket hit a home of a lady who was her paralyzed husband get to a bomb shelter. And it was because one of the Iron Dome batteries, one of the rockets sent up to intercept the Jihad rocket didn't work. And so the home got hit, and it was quite a tragedy, quite a story of the lady trying to help her paralyzed husband, and she died. And then there was a worker from Gaza. He had a work permit to come from Gaza to work in Israel. Because of the rocket war, he was staying with his employer or whatever, and he got hit on a work site. They didn't have shelters, and so he was it was a Gazan Arab worker at a job site in Israel, one of the two people killed by Islamic Jihad in this, a couple other apartments damaged. But the way Israel took out 6 of the top military leaders of the Islamic Jihad militia was quite impressive. And you're really wondering, has this restored deterrence the way General Aviv was describing it the other day? And here he says he can't tell us, but so much. But Israel apparently has incredible capabilities now, integrating artificial intelligence capabilities in computers in the digital world to take all the information coming in from all your surveillance, all your visuals on the enemy, and helping even with the target selection. You still have to go through a process. Is that a priority target for now? Are there civilians around it? You have to go through the check of the military JAG Corps, the legal advisors and whatever. You still have a process, but they've been able to speed it up quickly. If you've been watching some of the war in Ukraine, it's almost at a snail's pace sometimes. It's back trench warfare. Israel is so far ahead of so many nations, and maybe even the US in some ways, in its ability to integrate everything on the battlefield, because you're defending a certain space, the land of Israel, and you've got it covered so well. And this thought of having the iron beam this advanced beam, a laser beam that takes down the rockets before they ever leave the territory of the enemy, whether it's Gaza or Lebanon. That's a few years away. And I think the question is, coming out of this is, Iran, were they disappointed? Did they tell Hamas and Hezbollah to hold back this time? They're about to cross the nuclear threshold. Iran's in a more long-term game to get nuclear weapons and then threaten Israel under a nuclear umbrella. And so they want as many of these rockets still pointed at Israel without having to fire them. But if this iron beam is coming, does it mean you got to use it or lose it? Does it actually, if we're only 2 or 3 years away from developing and deploying laser weapons that can really eliminate all these rockets that are pointed at Israel from Gaza, from Lebanon, from Syria, even from Iraq, even from Iran, does that mean that Iran will now try to use them before they're no longer an effective weapon against Israel? And so we'll have to see how this plays out in the coming months and years. But as far as all the rocket wars we've had, I've been here through all of the main ones since the 2006. Been here since '97 full time, but since 2006, Second Lebanon War, where there were thousands of rockets coming in from Lebanon for 34 days over the northern half of Israel. That was pretty scary. Israel's come a long way since then. They deployed the Iron Dome in 2011 for the first time. And since then, it has been able to give Israeli officials space to make decisions of what to do and to protect the civilian heartland, while the Israeli Air Force especially, and the artillery units deal with specific threats within Gaza, gives them time so that they don't have to order, a ground incursion, which could involve a lot of casualties on the Israeli side. But these are some of the decisions, calculations. If the Iron Dome, it's still effective, but if you've even got something even better and especially cheaper to neutralize this rocket threat, that's really going to change the equation and really defang the Iranian threat in a lot of ways. So these next couple of years could really be critical. Iran's about to cross the nuclear threshold, but they also are about to lose their conventional rocket and mortar and missile threat against Israel through all these proxies. We'll see how this plays out. We ask you to pray for us. We're celebrating Jerusalem Day. It actually begins tonight. It's the day, the anniversary of Israel's reunifying the city of Jerusalem in 1967 in the Six-Day War in June of '67. Israelis mark it here with a flag march into the city. So far, just a few street scuffles in the streets of the old city of Jerusalem. Nothing too bad, nothing too out of the ordinary, but we pray it stays quiet. We know there are millions of Christians around the world praying for Israel now. Continue to pray for calm here. Continue to pray that somehow through the Lord's help, Israel would be able to neutralize the darts of the enemy, the arrows that would fly by day or night against the Jewish people here, the Jewish state. We know God has brought this people back not to be wiped out in some nuclear holocaust, but to brought them back to gather them and redeem them to himself. Amen. So please be praying, and thank you for tuning in today to the ICEJ weekly webinar. Really appreciate you coming from all over the world. And we looked in the chat section, people from the US, from Malaysia, from just one side, left and right, east and west, north and south from us here in Jerusalem. And just want to remind you that on Saturday, we have the start of the new Jewish month. It's the new moon. It's the start of the next month on the Hebrew calendar. And we're going to have our Rosh Chodesh prayer chain, which we have every month based on the Hebrew calendar. Right now, we're going for 10 or 12 days with around prayer groups, prayer warriors, some of our branches, churches all around the world from about 70 nations every month taking a part in this Rosh Chodesh prayer chain. You go to our website there, you can find out how you can become involved and take up an hour, commit to doing an hour of this prayer chain by arranging that with our prayer coordinator, Josh Gooding, and his wife, Anastasia Gooding. Bless them as they launch another Rosh Chodesh. Then next Wednesday, please join us for the weekly global prayer gathering. And we had a great time on there yesterday, praying for Africa, praying for Israel, and join us next week for the Isaiah 62 global prayer gathering, Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Israel time. And of course, next week on Thursday, 4 p.m. Jerusalem time, we'll join you again from our headquarters here in Jerusalem with another ICEJ weekly webinar. Thank you again for joining us. God bless you from Jerusalem.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next Thursday at 4 p.m. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on our social media pages for more exclusive ICEJ content.